morning now dawned and Shahrazaad broke off from what she had been allowed to say. Then, when it was the 24th night, she continued. I have heard, O auspicious king, that on hearing this, his grandmother became very angry and, looking at the eunuch, she reproached him, telling him that he had spoiled her son by taking him into a cookshop. The apprehensive eunuch denied this, saying, "We didn't go into the shop but merely passed by it." Ajib, however, insisted that they had gone in and had eaten, adding, "And it was better than your food." His grandmother got up and told her brother-in-law about this, turning him against the eunuch, who was then brought before him. "Why did you take my grandson into the cookshop?" Shams al-Din asked. In his fear, the eunuch again denied this, but Ajib insisted, "We did go in and we ate pomegranate seeds until we were full, after which the cook gave us a drink with snow and sugar." Shams al-Din became even angrier with the eunuch and asked him again. He again denied it, at which Shams al-Din said, "If you are telling me the truth, then sit down and eat in front of me." The eunuch came forward and tried to do this but failed and had to throw away what he had taken. "Master," he explained, "I am still full from yesterday." Shams al-Din then realized that he had indeed eaten in the cookshop. He ordered the slaves to throw him down, which they did, and he then started to beat him painfully. The eunuch called for help. "Don't beat me, master," he cried, "and I'll tell you the truth." After this, Shams al-Din stopped beating him and demanded the truth. "We did go into the shop," he said, "and the cook was preparing a dish of pomegranate seeds. He gave us some of it and, by God, never in my life have I tasted anything like it, while I have never tasted anything nastier than this stuff that is before us." Hassan's mother was angry and told him, "You must go to this cook and fetch us a bowl of pomegranate seeds that he has prepared. You can then show it to your master and he can then say which is better and more tasty." The eunuch agreed and was given a bowl and half a dinar. He went to the shop and said to Hassan, "In my master's house we have laid a bet on your cooking. They have pomegranate seeds there, so for this half dinar give me some of yours, and take care over it, for your cooking has already cost me a painful beating." Hassan laughed and said, "By God, this is a dish that nobody can cook properly except for my mother and me, and she is now in a distant land." He then ladled the food into the bowl and took it to put the finishing touches on it using musk and rosewater. The eunuch carried it back quickly to the camp, where Hassan's mother took it and tasted it. When she noted how flavorsome it was and how well it had been cooked, she realized who must have cooked it and gave a shriek before falling in a faint, to the astonishment of Shams al-Din. He sprinkled rosewater over her and after a time she recovered. "If my son is still in this world," she exclaimed, "it was he and no one else who cooked these pomegranate seeds. It has to have been my son, Hassan. No one else can cook it except him, for I taught him the recipe." When Shams al-Din heard this, he was overjoyed and exclaimed, "How I long to see my brother's son! Will time unite me with him? But it is only from Almighty God that I may seek a meeting with him." He got up immediately and went to his escort, ordering 20 men to go the cookshop, demolish it, and tie up the cook with his own turban. Then, he said, drag him here by force, but without injuring him in any way. The men agreed to do this, and Shams al-Din himself rode immediately to the palace of the governor of Damascus, whom he met and to whom he showed the letters that he had brought with him from the Sultan. The governor kissed them and then placed them on his head, before asking, "Where is the man you are looking for?" "He is a cook," replied Shams al-Din, and the governor instantly ordered his chamberlains to go to his shop. They went and found the shop demolished with all its contents smashed, for when Shams al-Din had gone to the governor's palace, his men had carried out his orders. They sat there waiting for him to return, while Hassan was asking, what could they have seen in the dish of pomegranate seeds that led to all this? Hassan. When he entered his tent, he ordered the cook to be produced and he was brought in, tied up with his own turban. Hassan wept bitterly on seeing his uncle and said, "Master, what offense do you charge me with?" "Was it you," asked Shams al-Din, "who cooked these pomegranate seeds?" "Yes," said Hassan, "and did you find anything in them that entitles you to cut off my head?" "For you this would be the best and lightest punishment," said Shams al-Din. "Master," said Hassan, "are you not going to tell me what I did wrong?" "Yes, immediately," said Shams al-Din, but he then called to the servants to bring the camels. They took Hassan with them, put him in a box, locked it and set off, traveling until nightfall. Then they halted and ate some food. They took Hassan out of his box, gave him something to eat and then put him back in it. They followed this pattern until they reached Kamra, when Hassan was taken out of his box and was again asked whether it was he who had cooked the pomegranate seeds. When he still said yes, Shams al-Din ordered him to be fettered, which was done, and he was put back in the box. The party then traveled on to Cairo, where they halted at the Radaniya camping ground. Shams al-Din ordered Hassan to be taken out and he ordered a carpenter to be fetched whom he told to make a wooden cross. "What are you going to do with it?" asked Hassan. "I will garrote you on it and then nail you to it, before parading you around the whole city," Shams al-Din told him. "Why are you doing this to me?" asked Hassan. "Because of your ill-omened cooking of the pomegranate seeds, for you cooked them without enough pepper," replied Shams al-Din. "Are you really doing all this to me because the dish lacked pepper?" said Hassan. "Was it not enough for you to keep me shut up, giving me only one meal a day?" "There was not enough pepper," said Shams al-Din, "and the only punishment for you is death." Hassan was both astonished and sorry for himself. "What are you thinking about?" asked Shams al-Din. "About superficial minds like yours," replied Hassan, "for if you had any intelligence you would not treat me like this." "We have to punish you," said Shams al-Din, "so as to see that you don't do this kind of thing again." "The least part of what you have done to me is a punishment," said Hassan, but Shams al-Din insisted that he must be strangled. While all this was going on, the carpenter was preparing the wood before his eyes. This went on until nightfall when Shams al-Din took Hassan and threw him into the box, saying, "The execution will take place tomorrow." He then waited until he was sure that Hassan was asleep, when he got up, lifted the chest and, After mounting his horse, he placed the box in front of him. He entered the city and rode on until he came to his house. To his daughter, Sit al-Husn, he said, "Praise be to God who has reunited you with your cousin. Get up and arrange the furnishings of the house as they were on your wedding night." The household was roused and the candles were lit, while Shams al-Din produced the paper on which he had drawn a plan showing how the furniture was to be arranged. Everything was put in its place, so that anyone looking at it would be in no doubt that this was as it had been on the actual wedding night. Shams al-Din gave instructions that Hassan's turban should be placed where he himself had left it, as should his trousers and the purse that was beneath the mattress. He then told his daughter to wear no more than she had been wearing when left alone with her bridegroom on her wedding night. "When your cousin comes in," he said, "tell him that he has been a long time in his visit to the latrine and then invite him to pass the rest of the night with you. Talk with him until daybreak, and I shall then explain the whole affair to him." Next, he took Hassan out of the chest, having first removed the fetters from his feet. He stripped off the clothes that he was wearing, so that he was left in a thin nightshirt with no trousers. The sleeping Hassan knew nothing about what was happening, but, as fate had decreed, he turned over and woke up to find himself in a brilliantly lit hallway. "This is a confused dream," he said to himself, but he then walked a short way to a second door, and, on looking, he found himself in the room in which his bride had been unveiled for him. There was the alcove and the chair, and he could see his turban and his other things. He was astonished at this sight and hesitated, moving forwards and then backwards. "Am I asleep or awake?" he asked himself, wiping his forehead and saying in amazement, "By God, this is the room of the bride who was unveiled for me, but where am I, for I was in a box?" While he was talking to himself, Sit al-Husn suddenly lifted the bottom of the alcove curtain and said, "Master, are you not going to come in? You have been a long time in the latrine." When he heard her voice and looked at her face, he laughed and said, "I am in a confused dream." He went into the alcove, where he sighed, and, thinking over his experiences, he was filled with confusion, particularly at the sight of the turban, his trousers and the purse with 1,000 dinars, and was at a loss to grasp what had happened. "God knows better," he said, "but this is a muddled dream." "What are you so astonished about?" asked Sit al-Husn. "You weren't like that at the beginning of the night." Hassan laughed and asked, "How long have I been away from you?" "Bless you," she said, "and may the name of God encompass you. You left to attend to yourself and then come back. Are you out of your mind?" Hassan laughed when he heard that and said, "You are right, but when I left you I took leave of my senses in the latrine and dreamt that I was a cook in Damascus and had been there for 10 years, when a boy, a great man's son, came in with a eunuch. At that, he rubbed his hand over his forehead and found the scar on it. "By God, lady," he said, "that almost seems to be true, because he struck me on the forehead and broke the skin, and it seemed as though I was awake at the time." He went on, "It was as though we had just gone to sleep in each other's arms, and then I had this dream and I appeared to have arrived in Damascus with no turban and no trousers and then worked as a cook." After remaining perplexed for a time, he said, "By God, I seemed to see that I had cooked a dish of pomegranate seeds and had put on too little pepper, but I suppose that I must have been asleep in the latrine and I must have seen all this in a dream." "What else did you see?" asked Sit al-Husn. Hassan told her, and then he said, "By God, if I had not woken up, they would have crucified me." "What for?" she asked. "Because there was too little pepper on the pomegranate seeds," he replied. "It seemed as though they had wrecked my shop and broken up my utensils and put me in a box. Then they brought a carpenter to make a cross for me and they were going to garrote me. Thank God that all this happened in a dream and not in real life." Sit al-Husn laughed and clasped him to her breast as he clasped her to his, but then he thought for a while and said, "By God, it seemed as though it was real, but I don't know why that should be." He was still perplexed when he fell asleep, muttering alternately, "I was asleep and I was awake." That went on until morning, when his uncle Shams al-Din came in and greeted him. Hassan looked at him and said, "By God, aren't you the man who ordered me to be tied up and crucified and ordered my shop to be wrecked because there was not enough pepper on the pomegranate seeds?" "No, my son," said Shams al-Din, "that the truth is now revealed and what was hidden has been made clear. You are the son of my brother and I only did all this to make sure that it was you who slept with my daughter that night. I could only be certain of this because you recognized the room and recognized your turban and your trousers, your gold, the note that you wrote and the one that your father, my brother, wrote. For I had never seen you before and could not identify you. I have brought your mother with me from Basra." He then threw himself on Hassan in tears. When Hassan heard what his uncle had to say, he was lost in astonishment and, embracing his uncle, he wept from excess of joy. "The reason for all this," Shams al-Din told him, "was what happened between me and your father." He then told him the story of this and of why Hassan's father, Nur al-Din, had gone to Basra. He sent for Ajib, and when his father saw him, he said, "This is the one who hit me with the stone." "He is your son," Shams al-Din told him. Hassan threw himself on the boy and recited these lines. "I have wept over our separation, and for long. Tears have been pouring from my eyes. I vowed, were time to join us once again. My tongue would never speak the word parting. Delight has now launched its attack on me. And my great joy has made me weep." As soon as he had finished speaking, in came his mother, who threw herself on him and recited. "On meeting, we complained of the great suffering of which we speak. It is not good to send complaints by messengers. She then told him what had happened to her after he had vanished, and he told her of his own sufferings, and they then gave thanks to God for having reunited them. 2 days after his arrival, Shams al-Din went to the Sultan. On entering, he kissed the ground before him and greeted him with a royal salute. The Sultan, who was glad to see him, smiled at him and told him to come nearer. He then asked him what he had seen in his travels and what had happened to him. Shams al-Din told him the story from beginning to end. "Praise be to God," said the Sultan, for the achievement of your desire and your safe return to your family and children. I must see your nephew, Hassan of Basra, so bring him to court tomorrow. Shams al-Din agreed to this if God Almighty wills and then took his leave and went out. When he got home he told his nephew that the Sultan wanted to see him. The servant obeys the order of his master, said Hassan, and he accompanied his uncle to the Sultan's court. When he was in the Sultan's presence, he greeted him with the greatest respect and courtesy, and began to recite. The one you have ennobled now kisses the ground. A man whose quest has been crowned with success. You are the Lord of glory, those who rest their hope on you obtain what will exalt them in this world. The Sultan smiled, motioning him to sit, and so he took his seat near his uncle, Shams al-Din. The Sultan then asked him his name, to which he replied, "The meanest of your servants is known as Hassan of Basra, and night and day he invokes blessings on you." The Sultan was pleased with what he said and wanted to put his apparent knowledge and good breeding to the test. "Do you remember any poetry that describes a mole?" he asked. "Yes," said Hassan, and he recited, "There is a dear one at the thought of whom my tears fall and I wail aloud. He has a mole, in beauty and in color, like the pupil of the eye or the heart's core." The Sultan approved of these lines and courteously asked him to produce more. So he recited, "Many a mole has been compared to a musk grain. But this comparison is not to be admired. Rather, admire the face encompassing all its beauty, so that no single part is missing from the whole." The Sultan rocked with delight and said, "Give me more, may God fill your life with blessing." Hassan then recited, "You, on whose cheek the mole is like a grain of musk set on a ruby, grant me your union, and do not be harsh. You who are my heart's wish and its nourishment." "Well done, Hassan," said the Sultan. "You have shown great proficiency. Now explain to us how many meanings does the word kal, or mole, have in Arabic?" 58, was his reply, although some say 50. "Correct," said the Sultan, who then asked him if he knew how beauty can be particularized. "Yes," he replied. "It comprises brightness of face, clear skin, a well-shaped nose, sweet eyes, a lovely mouth, a witty tongue, an elegant frame and the qualities of refinement, while its perfection is found in the hair." The poet Al-Shihab al-Hijazi has combined all these in a poem written in the Rajas meter. Say, brightness is in the face, the skin is clear. Let that be what you see. Beauty is rightly ascribed to the nose, while sweetness is attributed to eyes. Yes, and men talk of mouths as beautiful. Learn this from me, and may you not lack rest. The tongue has wittiness and the frame elegance, whereas refinement lies in the qualities. And perfect loveliness, they say, is in the hair. Listen to my verse, and hold me free from blame. The Sultan was pleased with what Hassan had said and felt well disposed towards him. He then asked him to explain the meaning of the proverbial expression "Shahrazaad is more cunning than the fox." "No, Your Majesty," replied Hassan, "may God Almighty aid you, that in the plague days Shahrazaad went to Najaf. Whenever he was going to pray, a fox would come and stand opposite him, imitating what he was doing and distracting him from his prayer. When that had gone on for a long time, one day he took off his shirt and put it on a cane, with its sleeves spread out. He then put his turban on top of the cane, tied a belt around the middle and set it up in the place where he prayed. The fox came up as usual and stood in front of it, at which Shahrazaad came up from behind and seized the animal. This is the explanation of the saying. When the Sultan heard his explanation, he said to Shams al-Din, "This nephew of yours is a man of perfect breeding, and I do not believe that his match is to be found in all Egypt." Hassan rose, kissed the ground before the Sultan, and took his seat like a Mamluk in front of his master, and the Sultan, delighted at having discovered the extent of his knowledge of the liberal arts, gave him a splendid robe of honor and invested him with an office that would help him to live well. Hassan rose and, after kissing the ground again, he prayed for the Sultan's enduring glory, and then asked permission to leave with his uncle Shams al-Din. When this was granted, he left and he and his uncle returned home. Food was brought, and after they had finished eating a pleasant meal, Hassan went to his wife's apartment and told her what had happened to him in the Sultan's court. She said, "He is bound to make you one of his intimate companions and shower gifts and presents on you. By God's grace, you are like a great light spreading the rays of your perfection, wherever you may be, on land or sea." He said to her, "I want to compose an ode in his honor, so as to increase the love that he feels for me in his heart." "A good idea," she agreed. "Produce good concepts and elegant expressions, and I'm sure that he will find your poem acceptable." Hassan then went off by himself and wrote some well-formed and elegantly expressed lines. They ran as follows. "I have a heroic patron, soaring to the heights of greatness, and treading on the path of generous and noble men. His justice brings security to every land, and for his enemies he has barred the path. He is a lion, pious and astute. If you call him king or angel, he is both. Those who ask him for favors are sent back rich. There are no words to sum him up. On the day of generosity, he is the shining dawn, while on the day of battle, he is darkest night. Our necks are fettered with his generosity, and by his favors he masters the freeborn. God grant us that he may enjoy long life, defending him from all that may bring harm." When he had finished composing this piece, he sent it to the Sultan with one of his uncle's slaves. The Sultan studied it with delight and read it out to those who were in attendance on him. They were enthusiastic in their praise, and the Sultan summoned Hassan and told him when he came, "From this day on, you are my intimate companion, and I have decreed for you a monthly allowance of 1,000 dirhams, in addition to what I have already assigned you." Hassan rose and thrice kissed the ground before the Sultan, praying for his lasting glory and long life. From then on, he enjoyed lofty status, his fame spread throughout the lands, and he lived in the greatest comfort and ease with his uncle and his family until he was overtaken by death. When Harun al-Rashid heard this story from Jafar, he was astonished and said, "These accounts should be written down in letters of gold." He then freed the slave and provided the young man with a monthly allowance to allow him to live in comfort. He also gave him one of his own concubines and enrolled him among his intimates. This tale, however, is not more wonderful than the story of what happened in the case of the tailor, the hunchback, the Jew, the inspector and the Christian. "What was that?" asked the king, and Shahrazaad explained. "I have heard, O fortunate king, that once upon a time, in the old days, in the city of China there lived a tailor, an open-handed man with a liking for pleasure and entertainment. He used to go out with his wife from time to time to see the sights. One afternoon, the two of them went early and came back home towards evening. On their way home, they found a hunchback whose strange appearance would raise a laugh even from a man who had been cheated in a bargain and which would dispel the grief of the sad. The tailor and his wife went over to look at him, and they then invited him to come home with them to keep them company that night. He agreed and accompanied them. Night had now fallen and the tailor went off to the market, where he bought a fried fish, together with bread, lemons and a milky dessert. On returning, he set the fish before the hunchback and they ate. His wife then took a large bit of fish and crammed it into her guest's mouth, which she covered with her hand, telling him that he had to swallow it in one gulp. "And I shall not allow you time to chew it." The hunchback did swallow it, but it contained a solid bone which stuck in his throat and, his allotted span having come to an end, he died.